with new eyes and to think, well, maybe that definitely could be. And hopefully what it will do is will eventually entrain conventional, traditional science, the renegades who are working within the fringe, to start looking along these new lines, because we know that it's not a question of Darwinism or creationism. Both have aspects and flaws within them, that it's something else, and it's probably not just a third alternative, but multiple. And when you look at extraterrestrial presence on this planet, and the fact that there was probably genetic tinkering, it certainly seems to make a lot of sense to me. What is really intriguing to me is that how they went about all of this and the way that they gave me this really unique curriculum. Because it wasn't necessarily sitting down in a lecturing situation. It was a lifetime of experiences that I had that I couldn't synthesize and didn't realize that they were all coming together to have a focused meaning until I was in my 30s. And I'd been going through this since I was in the crib. What they did was they actually took me to experience certain things where I would actually be taken and I'd be witnessing, and I don't know whether it was a hologram or a point in space-time that was in the past, but I'd be witnessing and looking at a group of workers who were working under another race, which I now later realized they were showing me that man actually had been used for some slave potential on this planet and had been harnessed for his capacity to help, well, help is a generous word, isn't it? To help another species. So the point is that it's not what you expect, and it's not like going to Starbucks, and it's not like just sitting down and they teach you, that they can have a very unique process to get you to understand a new system of reality and a new way of thinking. And it can be very, very experiential. So those are just some of the things that I have been through with them. What I'm most interested in now is not really what's going on with me, but what's going on with the culture and the way that we're trying to get this out. And if you look at, I love this ad from New Mexico. The New Mexican tourist industry got a lot of flack for this. The best place in the universe, New Mexico, Earth. And if you look closely, you see that they've integrated the extraterrestrial persona of their state in there, which I think is very intriguing. And if you go along now and you go into the modern culture, people, as I said, are really accepting more and more of what's out there. Am I going crazy? Was this place Korean just last week? You know, this is pretty much what we're looking at and what we're facing. Okay. So, you know, as I mentioned before, what for me has been really beneficial about the extraterrestrial contact is that it's given me new insights into not just human behavior, but something bigger. And it's given me insights into where humanity fits within other species. You know, because in some ways we are just those crazy flesh-eating mammals with herd-like tendencies. And we tend to forget that. And we tend to put ourselves at the top of the apex of that we are the ultimate supreme species and we are a deity. What I've learned through how extraterrestrials communicate, because they use holographic processes, they will often send an image to you that has an accompaniment of instant knowing. And that this goes on in the animal world too. And that interspecies communication is somewhat universal. And that human beings use language and ordered thought processes that does not seem to be communal to the rest of what is out there. And when we begin to penetrate into the species that are here beside us and the animal kingdom and understand how sophisticated their thought processes are and how much they know of what goes on and that they have their own cultures and relationships with each other, and they're not that different from us. It allows us to integrate better with the concept of extraterrestrial reality. Because I tell you, people are much more likely, not you, but the average person is much more comfortable looking at a fuzzy little animal who talks than extraterrestrial reality. And since I do both, let me tell you, they like the ordinary people like the fuzzy little animals a lot better. So what you'll learn and what the power of us, and I love what Gandhi had said, people put it at the end of their internet messages that the moral fiber of a nation is judged by how it treats its animals or something like that. That really is at the underpinning of our moving forward, is understanding that we are a collaborative species, that humans are not cut out apart the way that we set ourselves to, that we have to understand that we're one of a multiple order. And that order, while it goes off into the space realms, has to start right here at home. And we have to start paying better attention to what goes on in the planet and how we are treating our animals. Now, I said I had an interesting curriculum. And one of the very profound things that they started early with was the concept of reincarnation. Now, much of the world, you ask any Buddhist and, they say, sure, no problem, got it, it's part of our culture. The Western world still has a problem with this. Reincarnation is something that, while there is a lot of different type of evidence for it, can't always necessarily be proved empirically. But what they did with me is starting when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, they would come at night and I'd be pulled out and I would sit there and I would watch myself in these different existences. And I would watch and I would see myself as I was a tall, thin black man in ancient Africa who was swept upon by a leopard and became part of the food chain. I saw myself as a slave in ancient Egypt. And I looked down at my feet and I saw the hard ground that I slept on and the straw. I saw myself as being buried alive with a man who was my husband because I was part of his property. All these things where I was dying and had left my body because they were trying to get across the idea that we have an eternal soul and that they needed me to know not to be afraid, that no matter what happened in this lifetime, that wasn't it. It's a part of the journey. And with that, I was able to go forward and tackle life with a very different perspective than if I had been terrified and afraid, ooh, I'm gonna die. We're all gonna die, we just don't know when. And we've been born, we've lived, we've died time and time again. We just don't tend to remember it. When it comes to reincarnation, what I think is so important about it is that not only does it remind us of the eternalness of our being, but it allows us to sometimes look at life with some new eyes and provide some different answers. One of the things that I was left with is the ability to look at somebody and I can immediately see their soul and I can see the trail of the reincarnations that they've had. Now, a lot of people say, well, we shouldn't get caught up in it. Excuse me, we belong in the here and now. And I agree in that wholeheartedly. But sometimes it gives us different eyes to look at things differently. A woman I worked with just a few weeks ago, and as I talked to her and explained to her the most prominent series of visions around her was one in the 1800s in England, and how she was involved in the early labor union development, and how the smog and the soot just assailed her and she couldn't stand it. And she was so frustrated by what was happening with the businesses and how they were taking advantage of the people at that time. And at the end she laughed and she said, well, not so sure if there's anything to this or not, but I actually got my master's degree in studying labor law in England and I have a real issue with the pollution. And you will see that there are commonalities and carryovers and tie-ins. And usually the lives that surround you now are often the leftover issues that we're still dealing with, that we pull together. And if you can pull it together with your soul purpose and go forward and integrate it into your life as you move forward, then your work life can become your life work. So for me, the experience of working with the extraterrestrials and the whole journey of reincarnation had a real profound impact, because it wasn't just about my journey, but it was about working with other people's journeys too. So yeah, we can't get caught up in it. It doesn't really matter if you were Genghis Khan or Cleopatra, who cares? But what really matters is, what is your personal journey and what do you have to do now as you go forward? Now, leading to this and that we're eternal beings, the most important thing I've gotten from these experiences is that there is actually a science of the soul. And a lot of the